I finally bought my dream home, expecting my family to share my joy. Instead, they boycotted me, claiming my success humiliated my broke brother. When they demanded, I signed the deed over to him to make it fair. I prepared a legal trap that would shatter their entitlement forever. Before we begin today's story, we have an urgent announcement. Due to technical issues, this channel is shutting down. But don't worry, the stories continue. Please subscribe to our new channel, Daily Drip Stories. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The silence in the house wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating the excitement that should have been bubbling over. I was sitting on the floor of what was supposed to be the dining room, my back pressed against the cool, freshly painted drywall. Around me were stacks of unopened boxes, their cardboard flaps taped shut, holding the life I had worked 15 years to build. Outside, the rain was hammering against the brand-new double-pane windows I had spent weeks researching. It was a dark, dreary Tuesday evening, but the weather wasn't the reason I felt like I was going to throw up. My phone lay on the floorboards beside me, the screen black and silent now, but the message displayed on it moments ago was burned into my retinas. I had been fighting a migraine all day, the kind that starts at the base of your skull and wraps around your eyes like a vice. I attributed it to the stress of the move and the sheer exhaustion of scrubbing floors and assembling furniture until 3 in the morning. But now, reading the text message from my mother, Brenda, I realized the headache was the least of my problems. My body felt weak, trembling with a mixture of low blood sugar and high-octane shock. I reached for the phone again, my fingers shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I unlocked the screen, needing to read it one more time to make sure I hadn't hallucinated the cruelty. "We won't be coming on Saturday, Athena," the text read. It was so clinical, so cold. "And don't expect Jason or anyone from the cousin's side either. We've been talking, and we all agree that this housewarming is just a display of arrogance. You know Jason is struggling right now. Rubbing your wealth in his face is disgusting. We're staying home in solidarity with him. Don't contact us until you're ready to apologize for this selfishness." I read it out loud to the empty room, my voice cracking on the word selfishness. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I pulled my knees to my chest, gasping for air. This was the house I had eaten instant noodles for a decade to afford. This was the house I had worked 80-hour weeks as a senior software developer to secure. I hadn't gone on vacations. I hadn't bought new cars. I had saved every penny to buy a place where my family could finally gather for Christmas, a place that was safe and warm and mine. And now, 2 days before the party, they weren't just canceling. They were accusing me of malice. The betrayal was visceral. It felt less like a cancellation and more like an amputation. I looked around the beautiful, spacious room that I had envisioned filled with laughter and the smell of roast dinner, and suddenly, it just looked like a tomb. I was alone, completely and utterly alone in a 4-bedroom house that my family hated me for owning. I dropped the phone back onto the floor. The screen cracked slightly against the hardwood, a spiderweb fracture appearing in the corner, but I didn't care. The crack in the screen was nothing compared to the fracture that had just ripped through my life. The betrayal was worse than the exhaustion, worse than the debt, worse than the diagnosis of anxiety I'd managed for years. It was a precise, calculated strike at my heart. For the next hour, I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stared at the dust motes dancing in the dim light of the street lamp filtering through the window. Andrew found me like that when he got home from his firm. I heard the front door unlock, the heavy thud of his architectural portfolio case hitting the floor, and then his footsteps echoing down the hallway. "Athena," he called out, his voice cheerful. "I got the good champagne. I know we said we'd save it for Saturday, but I figured since we finished the master bath painting, we could." His voice trailed off as he entered the dining room and saw me curled into a ball on the floor, the room dark save for the ambient street light. "Athena," He dropped the grocery bag he was holding, the glass bottle clinking dangerously inside. He was at my side in a second, his knees hitting the hardwood. Hey, hey, what is it? Are you hurt? Is it a migraine? I couldn't speak. I just pointed a trembling finger at the phone on the floor. Andrew picked it up. I watched his face as he read the message. I saw the confusion first, the furrowing of his brow as he tried to process the words. Then came the shock, his eyes widening. And finally, the dark, simmering anger that tightened his jaw. Solidarity, Andrew whispered, the word tasting like poison in his mouth. They're boycotting your housewarming in solidarity with Jason because he's… What? Broke again. Because I'm rubbing it in his face, I whispered, my voice hoarse. Because I succeeded, Andrew. That's my crime. Andrew tossed the phone onto a nearby box of books with a scoff of disgust. He pulled me into his arms, rocking me gently. That is absolute insanity, Athena. You invited them to share your milestone. You offered to pay for their transport. You've been talking about this for years. I know, I sobbed into his shirt. I don't understand, I thought Mom would be proud. She always said she wanted us to do better than she did. She wants you to do better, Andrew corrected gently, stroking my hair, but not better than Jason. Never better than Jason. I closed my eyes, letting the truth of his words sink in. It was a harsh reality I had tried to ignore for decades. I thought back to the moment I had invited them. It was a month ago, at a family dinner at Brenda's cramped, rented duplex. I had brought dessert, a fancy cake from a bakery in the city, and laid the invitation on the table with a beaming smile. I finally closed on the property, I had said, waiting for the applause. Instead, the room had gone quiet. Jason, sitting across from me, had stopped chewing his steak. He looked at the invitation, then at me, his eyes narrowing. A 4-bedroom, Jason had asked, his voice dripping with mock incredulity. Just for you and the architect. What do you need 4 bedrooms for, Athena? You planning on running a hotel? No, I had said, my smile faltering. We want a guest room for you guys, and an office for me and a studio for Andrew. Must be nice, Brenda had muttered, aggressively clearing the table. Must be nice to have office money while your brother is trying to figure out how to keep his lights on. I had brushed it off then. I told myself they were just stressed. I told myself they would come around once they saw the house, once they saw I wanted to share it with them. But sitting here now, in the dark with Andrew, the reality was undeniable. They weren't stressed. They were jealous. Andrew stood up and paced the room, running a hand through his hair. So, what? They just expect us to cancel, to apologize for working hard. Apparently, I said, wiping my eyes. She wants me to apologize for being selfish. Selfish, Andrew laughed, a cold, sharp sound. You paid off her car loan last year. You paid Jason's bail when he got into that bar fight. You've been the Bank of Athena for 10 years. I know, I said quietly. I looked at the phone again. The notification light was blinking. Another message had come through, likely doubling down on the guilt trip. But as I looked at the cracked screen, a strange, cold sensation settled in my stomach. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something harder, something brittle. They thought this boycott would break me. They thought that by withdrawing their love, I would scramble to fix it, just like I always did. They thought I would beg. They thought I would write a check to Jason just to smooth things over so they would deign to eat my food and drink my wine. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They didn't know that the housewarming wasn't just a party. And they certainly didn't know about the conversation I'd overheard between Brenda and Jason 2 weeks ago, the one recorded on the old iPad I'd left at her house to fix. To understand why this text message was the nuclear option, you have to understand the dynamic of my family. I was the eldest, the responsible one. I was the girl who had a paper route at 12, worked at McDonald's at 16, and put herself through college on scholarships and night shifts. I became a software developer not because I loved coding initially, but because I looked at the salary bands and saw a way out of the poverty we grew up in. Jason, on the other hand, was the creative one, the dreamer. He was 2 years younger, 36 now, and had never held a job for longer than 6 months. Jason was a chameleon of failure. In his 20s, he was going to be a DJ. Brenda bought him thousands of dollars worth of turntables that gathered dust. Then, he was going to be a crypto investor. I watched him lose 10 grand of Brenda's retirement fund on a scam coin. Currently, his profession was vague. He called himself a lifestyle consultant, which mostly meant he posted photos of himself in rented cars on Instagram and tried to sell workout supplements to his high school friends. But despite his failures, or perhaps because of them, he was Brenda's auntie. Array world. Brenda, a retired homemaker who subsisted on a small pension and my monthly gifts, viewed Jason as a victim of circumstance. The world was just too hard for his sensitive soul. It was never his fault he was fired for lateness. The boss was a tyrant. It was never his fault he couldn't pay rent. The landlord was a crook. And me, I was the endless resource. Athena, you have so much, Brenda would say, eyeing my handbag or my shoes. You can't spare $500 for your brother. He needs new tires. You don't want him driving on unsafe tires, do you? If he crashes, it'll be on your conscience. That was her weapon of choice, my conscience. And for years, it worked. I paid for the tires. I paid for the phone bills. I paid because I wanted them to love me, and I thought buying their safety was the same thing as earning their love. But the house was different. This was the first thing I had done entirely for myself. The next morning, the day before the party, Andrew went to work, but I took the day off. I needed to prep the house, even if no one was coming. I was angrily scrubbing the kitchen island when the doorbell rang. I froze. Had they changed their minds? I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. It wasn't Brenda, it was Jason. He was standing on my porch, looking around with a critical sneer. He was wearing a tracksuit that looked like Gucci, but was definitely a knockoff from a street market, and pristine white sneakers. He was chewing gum aggressively. I opened the door, but I didn't step back to let him in. I blocked the entrance. Jason, I said, keeping my voice steady, I got Mom's text. I thought you were boycotting in solidarity. Chill, Athena, Jason said, pushing his sunglasses up onto his head. He didn't look me in the eye, he was looking past me, scanning the foyer, calculating the square footage. Mom's being dramatic. You know how she is. She said you agreed, I said. She said you felt I was rubbing my success in your face. Well, I mean, it is a bit much, isn't it? He gestured vaguely at the high ceilings. People are struggling, and you're out here buying a mansion. It's not a good look. I worked for this, Jason, for 15 years. Yeah, you clicked buttons on a computer. Hard work, he scoffed. Anyway, look, I'm here to offer a truce. Mom's really upset. She's crying. She feels like you've left us behind. My resolve wavered slightly. The image of my mother crying always got to me. I haven't left anyone behind. I invited you. Yeah, but invites are cheap, Jason said, leaning against the doorframe, invading my personal space. If you really want to fix this, if you want Mom to come tomorrow and stop bad-mouthing you to the whole family, you need to show you actually care. How? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'm in a tight spot, Jason said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. My apartment? There's mold. It's making me sick. I can't breathe there. I need to get out. He looked at me then, a practiced look of desperation in his eyes. You have 4 bedrooms, Athena, 4. And it's just you and Andrew. That's selfish. You know it is. What are you asking, Jason? Let me crash here, he said. Just for a few months, until I get my consulting business off the ground. I can take one of the spare rooms. I'll help with the yard. Mom would be so happy. She'd see you're sharing your blessings. She'd come to the party. Everyone would. He smiled, a slick, oily smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just give me a key, Athena. Be a good sister for once. I looked at him. I looked at the fake designer logo on his chest. I looked at the entitled set of his jaw. And suddenly, The memory of that iPad recording came flooding back. The conversation I had heard wasn't about mold, it wasn't about health. It was about this house, and it was about how long it would take to legally establish tenancy rights in our state. I stared at Jason, my hand gripping the door handle so hard my knuckles turned white. He was still smiling that practiced, manipulative smile, waiting for me to crumble like I always did. Just a few months, he repeated, sensing my hesitation and misinterpreting it as weakness. Come on, Athena, don't be a miser. Mom is already telling Aunt Carol that you've forgotten where you came from. Imagine what she'll say if I tell her you left me to rot in a moldy apartment while you have empty rooms gathering dust. The threat was thinly veiled, but it was there. Let me in, or we will destroy your reputation. I took a slow breath, forcing my heart rate to steady. I can't give you an answer right now, Jason, I lied, my voice remarkably calm. Andrew and I need to discuss it. It's his house too. Jason rolled his eyes. Since when does Andrew wear the pants? It's your money, isn't it? I'll let you know tomorrow, I said, stepping back and starting to close the door. Tomorrow. Jason jammed his foot in the doorway, blocking it. His smile vanished. Tomorrow is the party. If I don't have a key by tonight, don't expect to see any of us there. And don't expect a Christmas card either. I heard you, Jason. Remove your foot. He glared at me for a second, then retracted his foot with a scoff. You're unbelievable. Family first, right? Guess that was just talk. He turned and sauntered down the walkway to his car. A leased BMW he absolutely couldn't afford. As soon as he was gone, I locked the door, bolted it, and leaned against it, shaking. I didn't call Andrew immediately. Instead, I went upstairs to my new office. I opened my laptop and pulled up the file I had transferred from the old iPad 2 weeks ago. I had gone over to Brenda's house to fix her Wi-Fi. She had been out grocery shopping, and Jason was supposedly at an interview. I had found the iPad recording audio in the kitchen. Brenda often used it to record voice notes for her grocery lists because her eyesight was failing. But she had left it running. I put on my headphones and pressed play. The recording was grainy, but the voices were unmistakable. She's closing on the 15th, Jason's voice sneered from the recording. 4 bedrooms, Ma, it's ridiculous. It's sinful, Brenda's voice agreed. All that space while you're suffering. So here's the plan, Jason continued. I need to get in there before she gets settled. If I move in temporarily for a medical reason, like the mold allergy, she can't kick me out without looking like a monster. In this state, if I stay for 30 days and receive mail there, I have tenant rights. She'd have to formally evict me. Evict her own brother? Brenda gasped. She wouldn't dare. The family would tear her apart. Exactly, Jason laughed. Once I'm in, I'm in. I can save my rent money, maybe get a new car. And if she tries to make me pay, you just guilt her. Tell her I'm depressed. Tell her I'm trying. That's my boy, Brenda cooed. You're so smart, Jason. You deserve that house just as much as she does. More, really. She's always had it easy. I stopped the recording. She's always had it easy. The words echoed in my empty office. I looked at my hands, hands that had carpal tunnel from years of coding, hands that were dry from scrubbing floors, because I couldn't afford a cleaner while saving for the down payment. I wasn't just a sister to them. I was a host organism, and Jason was the parasite preparing to burrow in. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Andrew yet. I called a different number. Lawson and Associates, a crisp voice answered. Hi, this is Athena. I need to speak to Mr. Lawson. It's about the property title and a potential trespass issue. For the next 3 hours, I was no longer the grieving daughter. I was the senior software developer. I was debugging a critical error in my life's code. I pulled property records. I drafted a document. I contacted the local police non-emergency line to inquire about private property trespassing laws. When Andrew came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen island with a bottle of wine and a stack of papers. Everything okay? He asked, eyeing the paperwork. Did Jason come by? He did, I said, pouring Andrew a glass. He asked for a key. Andrew's face darkened, and I told him I'd think about it. I took a sip of wine, my eyes cold, but I finished thinking. I slid a paper across the counter to him. It wasn't a lease. It was a formal notice of no trespass, drafted by my lawyer. The party is still on, I said, but the guest list has changed. And the entertainment, well, let's just say I'm preparing a special presentation. The morning of the housewarming party broke with brilliant sunshine, a stark contrast to the gloom of the previous days. The house was ready. The caterers, a local team I had hired as a treat to myself, were setting up in the kitchen. I had sent a final text to Brenda and Jason the night before. I understand you won't be attending. That is your choice. I respect your solidarity. They hadn't replied. They were probably expecting me to call begging this morning. They were expecting me to cave, to drive over to Jason's apartment with a key and an apology. Instead, I had spent the morning confirming the real guest list. Originally, I had invited mostly family, with a few close friends. But after the boycott text, I realized I had been catering to the wrong crowd. I had reached out to my colleagues, my mentors, Andrew's architectural partners, and my close circle of friends from college, people who actually celebrated my success. Hey, I know it's last minute, I had messaged them, but I'm throwing a housewarming. No family drama, just good food, good wine, and people who have supported my career. To my surprise, almost everyone said yes. By 2:00 p.m., my driveway was full. Not with rusted sedans of judgmental ants, but with the cars of people who respect. Demi, the house was filled with the hum of conversation, laughter, and genuine compliments. Athena, the wainscoting is incredible, my boss, Sarah, said, running her hand along the wall. You did this yourself. Andrew and I beamed, handing her a glass of champagne. It's stunning, she said. You deserve this. I know how hard you worked on the Omega project to get that bonus. You deserve this. 3 words my mother had never said. The atmosphere was light, sophisticated, and joyful. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't worrying about Jason making a scene or Brenda criticizing the food. And then the doorbell rang. It was 3:30 p.m. Everyone I had invited was already here. My stomach dropped. I knew who it was. I signaled to Andrew. He nodded, setting down his drink and moving to stand beside me. I opened the door. Brenda stood there. Beside her was Jason, carrying a duffel bag. Behind them were Aunt Carol and Uncle Bob, looking grim-faced. It was an ambush. We decided to come, Brenda announced loudly, pushing past me into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. We decided we couldn't let you ruin the family over your pride. We're here to forgive you. The chatter in the living room died down. My guests, lawyers, developers, architects, turned to look at the intrusion. Forgive me, I asked, standing my ground. I didn't close the door. I thought you were boycotting in solidarity with Jason. We are, Jason said, stepping forward. He dropped the heavy duffel bag on my pristine hardwood floor with a loud thud. That's why I brought my stuff. I figured if I'm staying here, the family can't be mad at you anymore, right? Problem solved. He smiled at the room of strangers, raising a hand. Hey everyone, I'm the brother. I'll be living here for a bit. Don't mind me. Brenda turned to me, her voice dropping to a hiss. Don't make a scene, Athena. You have guests. Just let him take the back room, and we'll pretend this whole nasty business never happened. Look, I even brought your favorite potato salad. She held up a Tupperware container like it was a peace treaty. I looked at the potato salad. I looked at Jason's duffel bag. I looked at the smug satisfaction on their faces. They truly believed I was trapped. They thought the social pressure of my fancy friends would force me to comply to avoid a scene. You're right, Mom, I said loudly, my voice carrying through the silent room. I shouldn't make a scene. I turned to Andrew. Andrew, could you please connect my laptop to the living room TV? Jason frowned. What? We don't want to watch TV. Oh, it's not TV, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. It's a welcome video. Since you're here to forgive me, I think everyone should understand exactly what I'm being forgiven for. Athena, what are you doing? Brenda hissed, grabbing my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. She sensed the shift in the air. Don't embarrass us. I'm not embarrassing anyone, Mom, I said, gently but firmly removing her hand. I'm just sharing the family dynamic. Andrew gave me a thumbs up. The 65-inch television screen in the living room flickered to life. My guests, sensing the tension, had gathered around. They were silent, their drinks forgotten. Jason looked confused, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Is this a slideshow? Did you make a slideshow of yourself? He scoffed, trying to regain control. Something like that, I said. I pressed the spacebar on my remote. The screen didn't show photos. It showed a black screen with a waveform audio visualization. And then, Jason's voice boomed through the high-fidelity speakers I had just installed. So here's the plan. I need to get in there before she gets settled. If I move in temporarily for a medical reason, she can't kick me out without looking like a monster. The color drained from Jason's face so fast it looked like he was fainting. The room gasped. My boss, Sarah, covered her mouth. Then Brenda's voice filled the room, loud and clear. Evict her own brother? She wouldn't dare. The family would tear her apart. Once I'm in, Jason's voice laughed on the recording. I can save my rent money. And if she tries to make me pay, you just guilt her. That's my boy. You're so smart, Jason. You deserve that house just as much as she does. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was absolute. It was deafening. Jason was frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Brenda was trembling, her face a mask of horror, not of remorse, but of exposure. Aunt Carol and Uncle Bob, who had been standing behind them in support, were slowly backing away, looking at Brenda with wide eyes. You recorded us, Brenda shrieked, her voice cracking. That's illegal, you spied on us. I recorded audio in my own iPad that I left in your kitchen to fix, I corrected calmly. And in this state, recording a conversation where there is no reasonable expectation of privacy, like a kitchen with the windows open, is admissible when it proves intent to commit fraud. Fraud, Jason sputtered. It's not fraud, it's family. I just needed a place to stay. No, Jason, I said, stepping closer to him. You wanted tenant rights. You wanted to squat in my home so I couldn't evict you. You wanted to steal the peace I worked 15 years to build. I turned to the room, addressing my guests, then looked back at my mother. You told everyone I was selfish, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering. You told the family I was showing off. But the truth is, you were planning to steal from me. You were planning to use my love for you as a weapon to let Jason live off my labor. Again. Athena, please, Brenda pleaded, realizing the audience she was in front of. We can talk about this in private. Jason made a mistake. He was just joking. He has a duffel bag, Mom, I pointed out. That's a very heavy joke. I reached into a folder on the kitchen island and pulled out the document I had prepared with Mr. Lawson. This is a notice of no trespass, I said, holding it out to Jason. If you do not leave my property in the next 5 minutes, I will call the police. And since I have a recorded confession of your intent to establish fraudulent residency, I don't think they'll be very sympathetic. Jason stared at the paper. He looked at the room full of professionals in suits and dresses, all looking at him with utter disdain. He looked at Andrew, who was standing by the door with his arms crossed, looking ready to physically remove him. You're crazy, Jason spat, his face twisting into ugly anger. You're a psycho who records their own mother. A daughter who learned she couldn't trust her, I replied. Fine, Jason grabbed his duffel bag. Keep your stupid house. It's too far from the city anyway. Come on, Ma. He turned to leave, expecting Brenda to follow. But Brenda didn't move. She was staring at me, tears streaming down her face. Athena, How could you? In front of everyone, I'm your mother. And I'm your daughter, I said softly. But that never seemed to matter as much as being Jason's bank. I'm not leaving, Brenda sobbed. I'm not leaving until you apologize for humiliating us. Then you'll be waiting a long time, I said. Andrew. Andrew opened the front door wide. Andrew, I repeated, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts to remain composed. Please show them out. Andrew moved toward Brenda, his expression grim but polite. He didn't grab her. He simply gestured toward the open door where the afternoon sun was spilling onto the porch, a stark contrast to the dark storm brewing in my living room. Brenda, it's time to go. But Brenda didn't move. Instead, she did something that made the air in the room turn to ice. She sat down. She marched over to my pristine, cream-colored sectional, the one I had saved for 6 months to buy, and sat right in the middle of it, crossing her arms over her chest. She looked like a petulant child staging a sit-in, but the malice in her eyes was entirely adult. No, Brenda declared, staring straight at me. I am not going anywhere. This is my daughter's house. I have a right to be here. And if you think I'm going to let you kick your brother out onto the street because of a misunderstood recording, you are out of your mind. She turned her gaze to Aunt Carol and Uncle Bob, who were still hovering near the entryway, looking like they wanted the floor to open up and swallow them whole. Carol, Brenda cried out, her voice shrill. Are you going to stand there and let her do this? She's treating us like criminals. Look at her, prancing around in front of her rich friends, humiliating her own flesh and blood. Tell her, Carol, tell her family helps family. The room turned to Aunt Carol. I looked at her too. Carol was Brenda's younger sister, a woman who had always been passive, always nodding along to Brenda's endless complaints about how unfair the world was. I braced myself for the lecture. I expected her to tell me to be the bigger person. Carol looked at Brenda, sitting obstinately on the sofa. Then she looked at Jason, who was standing by the door clutching his duffel bag, looking like a cornered rat. Finally, she looked at the TV screen, where the audio waveform was still paused. Brenda, Carol said slowly, her voice quiet. Did you really say that? That you wanted to use tenant laws to trap her? It was just talk. Brenda waved her hand dismissively. We were just brainstorming ways to get Athena to do the right thing. She has 4 bedrooms, Carol. 4. Jason is living in a shoebox. Where is the justice in that? The justice, I interrupted, stepping forward, is that I worked for this, Mom. And Jason didn't. He tries, Brenda screamed, slamming her hand on the cushion. He tries so hard, the world is just against him. No, Brenda, Aunt Carol said, her voice suddenly gaining strength. The world isn't against him. You are. Brenda froze. Excuse me. Carol took a step closer, her face flushing red. I heard that recording. You weren't talking about helping him. You were talking about tricking her. You were talking about stealing from her. Carol turned to me, her eyes wet. Athena, I didn't know. When she told us you were refusing to let him stay, she said you hated him. She said you laughed at his poverty. She never said they planned this. She's lying, Jason shouted from the door. That recording is edited. It's AI. You can fake anything these days. It's not fake, Jason, I said calmly. And neither is the police officer I'm about to call. I pulled my phone from my pocket. You wouldn't, Brenda sneered, though her confidence was visibly cracking. You wouldn't call the police on your own mother. Think about what that would look like. Think about your reputation. She swept her hand toward my guests. Do you think these people want to do business with a woman who arrests her own mother? I looked at my guests. I looked at Sarah, my boss. I looked at Marcus, my mentor from the university. I looked at my college roommate, Jessica. Sarah stepped forward. She was a formidable woman, the CEO of a tech firm, and she had 0 tolerance for bullies. Actually, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the room like a laser. I think we'd all feel much safer doing business with a woman who knows how to protect her assets from fraud. If you need a witness statement for the police report, Athena, I'm happy to provide one. Me too, Marcus added, crossing his arms. Count me in, Jessica said. A murmur of agreement went through the room. My fancy friends weren't judging me. They were rallying around me. They saw exactly what was happening, a professional woman being targeted by toxic entitlement. Brenda looked around the room, seeing a wall of hostile faces. Her power, the power of social shame she had used to control me for years, evaporated instantly. But she still refused to move. I'm not leaving, she hissed. I'm staying right here until Jason gets a key. I dialed 911. Emergency, which service? Police, I said, my eyes locked on my mother. I have intruders in my home who are refusing to leave after being served a verbal and written trespass notice. I am fearing for my safety as the situation is escalating. The wait for the police was the longest 10 minutes of my life. The party had ground to a halt. No one was eating. No one was drinking. The room was heavy with a suffocating tension. Jason had slumped against the wall, muttering under his breath. Brenda sat rigid on the sofa, staring at the wall, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. When the two officers arrived, a tall man and a younger woman, the relief nearly buckled my knees. Ma'am, the male officer asked, stepping into the foyer, you called about a trespass. Yes, I said, handing him the document Mr. Lawson had prepared. I am the sole owner of this property. These two individuals, Brenda and Jason, have been asked to leave multiple times. They are refusing. The officer looked at the document, then at Brenda. Ma'am, is this your property? I'm her mother, Brenda burst out, standing up. I have a right to be here. She's treating me like a stranger. Ma'am, that's a civil matter, the officer said, his tone bored but firm. If your name isn't on the deed and the owner wants you to leave, you have to leave. Otherwise, you're trespassing. But my son needs a place to stay, Brenda pointed at Jason. She has 4 bedrooms. It's criminal to keep them empty. It's not criminal, ma'am. It's private property, the officer said. He put a hand on his belt. Now, I'm going to ask you once to vacate the premises. If you refuse, I will have to escort you out in handcuffs. Do you want to leave in your car or in mine? Brenda looked at the handcuffs. She looked at me. For the first time in 34 years, she realized that her tears, her guilt trips, and her manipulation had zero currency here. The law didn't care that she was my mother. The law only cared that this was my house. You're dead to me, Brenda whispered, her voice venomous. You hear me, Athena? You're dead to us. Don't come crawling back when you're lonely in this big, empty house. I won't, I said softly. She grabbed her purse and marched to the door, shoving past Andrew. Jason followed her, keeping his head down, the duffel bag bumping against his legs. The police officers followed them out to the driveway to ensure they actually left. As the front door clicked shut, a profound silence filled the room. I felt like I was going to collapse. My adrenaline was crashing. I leaned back against the wall, covering my face with my hands. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Aunt Carol. I'm sorry, she whispered, pulling me eye. NTO a hug. I'm so sorry I didn't see it before. It's okay, Aunt Carol, I sobbed, finally letting the tears fall. No, it's not, she said firmly. But you were brave, you were so brave. From the living room, someone started clapping. I looked up. It was Sarah. Then Marcus joined in, then Andrew. Within seconds, the entire room of 30 people was applauding. It wasn't a polite golf clap. It was a raucous, supportive ovation. Andrew walked over, took my hand, and raised it in the air. To Athena, he said, his voice thick with emotion, and to the House of Peace. To Athena, the room cheered. I looked around at the faces of the people who truly cared about me. Brenda was right about one thing: the house was big, but she was wrong about it being empty. It was full of love. It just wasn't the kind of love she knew how to give. The aftermath of the party was not quiet. The extinction burst, a psychological term Andrew told me about, began almost immediately. Brenda and Jason didn't go quietly into the night. They went online. By the next morning, my Facebook feed was a war zone. Brenda had posted a long, rambling diatribe about ungrateful children and the evil of money. She didn't name me directly, but the implication was clear. She claimed she had been thrown out into the cold, it was 70 degrees and sunny, and that I had abandoned family for status. Jason was less subtle. He sent me 27 text messages between midnight and 4:00 a.m. They ranged from begging, "Come on, Athena, I'm desperate," to threatening, "You'll regret this, watch your back," to purely delusional, "I'm suing you for emotional distress." I didn't reply to a single one. Instead, I spent my Sunday morning with Andrew, drinking coffee on our back porch, listening to the birds, and compiling a PDF. I took screenshots of Brenda's posts. I exported Jason's text logs. I combined them with the audio recording and the police report number from the party. On Monday morning, I didn't go to work. I went to the courthouse. With Mr. Lawson by my side, I filed for a temporary restraining order against both of them. The judge, a stern woman with glasses, listened to the audio recording. When she heard Brenda say, "Evict her own brother," she wouldn't dare. Her eyebrows shot up. "It seems," the judge said, looking over her glasses at me, "that there was a premeditated conspiracy to defraud you of your property rights and manipulate tenancy laws. Order granted. 500 feet. No contact, direct or indirect." Serving the order was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. Aunt Carol told me about it later. She had gone to Brenda's house to pick up a casserole dish and was there when the process server arrived. "Brenda threw a vase," Carol told me over the phone, her voice hushed. "She couldn't believe you actually did it. She kept screaming, 'I'm her mother, she can't restrain me.' But the deputy told her if she contacted you again, she'd go to jail." "And Jason?" I asked. "Jason? Well, that's the other news," Carol sighed. "Since he couldn't move in with you, his landlord finally caught up with him. He was evicted yesterday. He's sleeping on Brenda's couch. They're miserable, Athena. They just sit there and feed off each other's misery." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. I didn't want them to suffer. I just wanted them not to make me suffer. But they made their choices. "They did," Carol agreed. "Listen, Bob and I, we were wondering, if you're not too busy, maybe we could come over for dinner next week, just us. No drama." "I'd like that, Aunt Carol," I said, smiling. "I'd like that very much." Over the next 6 months, my life transformed. Without the constant drain of Brenda's financial demands and Jason's crises, my savings account began to replenish. But more importantly, my emotional bandwidth replenished. I hadn't realized how much energy I spent bracing for impact. I hadn't realized that every time my phone buzzed, my cortisol spiked, expecting a guilt trip or a request for money. Now, when my phone buzzed, it was Andrew sending me a funny meme, or Sarah asking if I wanted to grab lunch, or Aunt Carol sharing a recipe. The house became what I had always dreamed it would be. Andrew and I turned the guest room that Jason had demanded into a library. We lined the walls with bookshelves and put 2 comfortable armchairs by the window. It became my sanctuary. One evening in late November, the first snow of the year began to fall. I was sitting in the library, a book in my lap, watching the snowflakes swirl in the streetlights outside. The house was warm, silent, and safe. Andrew walked in, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. He sat in the chair opposite me and looked out the window. "It's peaceful," he said. "It is," I agreed. "Do you miss them?" he asked gently. I thought about it. I thought about the mother I wished I had, the one who would have hugged me and said good job without adding, "But what about Jason?" I missed her, but she never existed. I thought about the mother I actually had, the one who plotted to trap me in my own home. I didn't miss her, not even a little. "No," I said, taking the mug from him. "I don't miss the chaos. I don't miss the guilt. For the first time in my life, I feel clean." Andrew reached out and squeezed my hand. "You broke the cycle, Athena. That's the hardest thing to do." "We broke it," I corrected him. "I couldn't have done it without you." We sat there for a long time, watching the snow blanket the yard, my yard. I thought about Jason, likely sleeping on Brenda's couch, complaining about how unfair the world was. I thought about Brenda, bitter and angry, telling anyone who would listen that her daughter abandoned her. They were trapped in a prison of their own making, a prison of entitlement and resentment. I, on the other hand, was free. I had bought a house, yes, but the real purchase wasn't the drywall or the timber or the land. The real purchase was my freedom. And looking around at the warm light reflecting off the books, listening to the soft breathing of the man who loved me for me, I knew it was worth every single penny. I took a sip of the hot chocolate. It was sweet, warm, and perfect. So, Andrew said, breaking the silence with a grin, since we have 2 other spare rooms, what do you think, home gym or a dedicated Lego room? I laughed, the sound ringing clear and happy through the house. Why not both? I was the architect of my own life now, and I could build whatever I wanted.